The morning rain came down harder than the weather app had promised. She stood under a small umbrella that did very little to protect her from the wind. The city was already alive with noise. Car horns, rushing footsteps, and the distant hum of early commuters trying to beat the Monday rush. She looked at her phone again. The Uber app said the driver was 2 minutes away. 2 minutes felt like forever when you were already late. Her shoes were soaked. Her hair was frizzing despite her best effort. And the folder she carried for the interview was starting to curl at the edges from the damp air. Her name was Emily Carter, 26 years old, fresh out of college with dreams that felt far too big for her small apartment, and even smaller paycheck. She had been juggling part-time jobs while applying for something, anything, that felt like a real career. Today's interview felt like a last shot before she'd have to rethink everything. She sighed, checking the address again. Blake Innovations. The name sounded powerful. She'd read about the company online. Sleek, modern, and successful. Everyone said its founder was one of those genius billionaires who had built it from scratch. Emily had also read that he was cold, distant, and impossible to impress. She wasn't thinking about any of that now. She was thinking about how she'd have to apologize for being late before the interview even started. She looked down at her phone again and saw that her Uber had arrived. A sleek black Tesla pulled up to the curb and she hurried over, pulling open the door without even checking the license plate. "Hi, sorry. Can we go to the Blake Innovations Tower on Mission Street?" she said quickly, sliding into the passenger seat. The man behind the wheel looked at her with calm eyes. He wore a dark suit and had the kind of posture that made him seem like he was in control of everything, even the rain. He didn't say much, just gave a small nod and started driving. Emily exhaled in relief, brushing rain off her coat. "Thank you so much. I'm running late for a really important interview. I thought I'd never get a ride in this weather." The man glanced at her briefly, amused. "Rough morning?" "You could say that," she laughed nervously. "I woke up late because my alarm didn't go off, spilled coffee on my only clean shirt, and now I'm going to meet people who probably have more money in their watches than I've seen in my bank account." He chuckled softly. "Sounds like quite the start." "Tell me about it," she said, staring out the window as the city passed by. "And the company, and I'm sure it's great and all, but sometimes these big places forget that real people work there. They just care about numbers." He raised an eyebrow but kept his tone friendly. "You think so?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "Maybe I'm wrong. But you hear stories, right? Companies that look perfect from the outside. But inside, everyone's burned out or scared to speak up. I just want to work somewhere that actually listens." For a moment, silence filled the car except for the sound of the wipers moving across the windshield. The man glanced at her again, curious. "And what would you do differently if you were running one of those companies?" She laughed. "Me? Oh, I'm just trying to land a job, not run a company." "Still," he said calmly, "you must have ideas." She hesitated, then smiled. "I guess. I'd make sure everyone's voice mattered. Not just the people at the top. I'd make sure people could go home on time and not feel guilty for it. I'd make sure new ideas were welcome even from the youngest person in the room." He nodded slowly, clearly interested. "That's not a bad philosophy." "Thanks," she said, still thinking he was just making conversation to pass the time. "Sorry if I'm talking too much. I do that when I'm nervous." "It's fine," he said with a small smile. "You seem passionate." "That's rare." That comment made her pause. Something about his tone was calm but heavy, as if he'd said that to himself more than to her. Emily shifted awkwardly. "I'm sorry, I didn't even ask your name. You've been so nice driving me through this rain." He smiled again, eyes on the road. "Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Ethan. I'm Emily." They hit a red light, and for a brief second he turned to look at her. There was a quiet intensity in his expression, not unkind, just observant, as though he was trying to understand her. "So, Emily," he said after a pause, "what made you choose marketing?" She laughed softly. "Honestly, I wanted to tell stories. Not in a writer way, but in a way that made people feel something about products or ideas. My mom used to say I could sell ice to a penguin because I always knew how to explain things in a way people related to." "Your mom sounds wise," he said. "She is," Emily smiled. "Or was. She passed away last year." Ethan's face softened. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," she said quietly. She would have laughed at me right now. Dripping wet, late to an interview, talking to a total stranger about my life choices. He smiled gently. Maybe she'd be proud you're still going for it. That made Emily stop and look at him. She hadn't expected a stranger, a driver, to say something so kind. Thanks, she said softly. You're actually a really good listener. Not what I expected from an Uber driver, no offense. None taken, he said with a grin. The light turned green and the car moved forward again. The streets began to clear as they got closer to the financial district. Emily tried to fix her hair in the reflection of her phone screen. Do you ever wonder what it's like to work in one of those fancy offices? She asked. Ethan smirked slightly, every now and then. I bet they're not as perfect as they look, she said, laughing. You know what's funny? The company I'm interviewing for today, Blake Innovations, they're supposed to be this huge deal. I read that their founder is super private, barely ever talks to the press, but honestly, I bet he's just another rich guy who doesn't care about people like me. Ethan coughed lightly, trying not to laugh. You think so? I mean, yeah, she said, shrugging. No offense to rich people, but come on. If you've got that much money, you probably forget what real life feels like. I doubt he's ever had to choose between paying rent or buying groceries. Ethan chuckled softly, his eyes still on the road. That's a fair assumption, Emily sighed. Sorry, I shouldn't be ranting to you about this. You probably think I'm crazy. Not at all, he said. Actually, I think you have some interesting points, she smiled. Thanks, Ethan. You're officially my favorite Uber driver, he laughed quietly. Glad to hear it. When they finally pulled up in front of the massive glass tower, Emily felt her stomach twist into knots. The building seemed to touch the sky. Its mirrored windows reflected the gray clouds, making it look both powerful and cold. Ethan parked near the entrance. Emily reached into her bag, fumbling for her phone. Oh, right. I have to end the trip and rate you, don't I? He looked at her, a slight smile tugging at his lips. If you insist. She tapped the screen and added a generous tip. You totally earned it. Thank you again for the ride and for listening to me ramble. You're welcome, he said. Good luck with your interview, Emily. Thanks. I'll need it, she said with a nervous laugh as she pushed the door open. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. She stepped out, clutching her folder and umbrella. Maybe I'll see you again someday, one when I can afford a nicer Uber. He smiled. Maybe you will? Emily hurried toward the building entrance, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. She didn't look back to see Ethan still sitting there, watching her walk inside. For a long moment, he stayed parked, lost in thought. Then he finally pulled away, the Tesla gliding silently into the traffic. Inside the building, Emily tried to shake off her nerves. The lobby was bright, filled with polished marble and quiet efficiency. People in sharp suits moved quickly, checking watches and holding coffee cups that probably cost more than her lunch. She took a deep breath and checked in at the reception desk. Interview for the marketing position, she said with a smile. The receptionist nodded, handing her a visitor badge. Take the elevator to the 24th floor. Someone will meet you there. Emily thanked her and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly out of place, but there was still determination in her eyes. Okay, she whispered to herself. You've got this. The elevator dinged softly as it rose, floor by floor, carrying her closer to what she thought was just another chance at a job. She had no idea that the man she'd just mistaken for a driver was waiting on the other side of those doors. Not as a stranger, but as the person who could change her life forever. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Emily stepped into a bright hallway lined with glass walls and quiet offices. Everything looked expensive. Minimalist furniture, silver nameplates, and the kind of silence that made every sound of her heels echo too loudly. She clutched her folder and tried to look confident as she approached the assistant at the far desk. Hi, I'm Emily Carter. I have an interview scheduled for 10 o'clock. The assistant smiled politely. Yes, Miss Carter, please wait a moment. Mr. Blake will see you shortly. Emily froze. Mr. Blake? She repeated softly, feeling her stomach drop. That was the CEO's name, Ethan Blake, the billionaire founder. The one she'd just spent 15 minutes complaining about in the car. Her pulse quickened. Wait, I thought I was meeting the marketing director? The assistant shook her head. Mr. Blake requested to conduct this interview personally. Emily forced a smile, but her hands trembled. She wanted to run back into the elevator, but it was already too late. She could see through the glass wall ahead. A tall man in a dark suit standing by the window. He turned around. And there he was, the Uber driver. Her heart nearly stopped. Ethan's expression was calm, unreadable. He looked exactly the same as he had in the car, composed, confident, and slightly amused. Only now she understood why. For a moment she couldn't move. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She had talked his ear off about how rich people didn't care about real workers. To his face. The assistant opened the door. "Mr. Blake will see you now." Emily took a deep breath, lifted her chin and stepped inside. "Good morning." "Ms. Carter," Ethan said, his tone polite but with that familiar warmth in his voice. "Good morning," she said quickly, trying to sound normal but hearing her voice shake. "And, thank you for the ride earlier." Ethan smiled just slightly. "You're welcome. Please have a seat." Emily sat down, gripping her folder like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I owe you an apology," she blurted out. "I had no idea who you were. I thought you were my Uber driver. I'm so sorry for what I said. I didn't mean any of it." "Well, I mean, I did, but not about you. Well, I didn't know it was you." Ethan raised a hand, gently stopping her. "It's all right, Miss Carter. I'm not offended. In fact," he said with a hint of a smile, "I rather enjoyed the honesty." She blinked, unsure how to respond. He sat down across from her, resting his elbows on the table. "You said something interesting in the car. That big companies forget about the people who make them run. I've heard that before, but not often from someone interviewing here." Emily's nerves began to ease a little. His tone wasn't harsh or cold. It was curious. "I just meant that sometimes the people at the top don't see what it's like for the rest," she said carefully. "I wasn't talking about you personally." Ethan nodded. "But you were right to say it. We have a tendency to get comfortable in our success. It's easy to lose perspective." That surprised her. She hadn't expected him to agree. He leaned back slightly. "So tell me, Emily, what would you do differently if you were part of this company?" She hesitated. "You really want me to answer that?" "I wouldn't have asked otherwise." Emily took a breath, choosing her words. "I think people work better when they feel like they belong. I'd try to make the company more human. Less numbers, more people. I'd focus on the story behind the brand, not just the product." He nodded slowly. "Interesting." She relaxed a little more and added, "You've built something incredible here, Mr. Blake. Everyone knows your company. But sometimes success can make people afraid to take new risks. Maybe you need someone who still sees things from the outside." A quiet smile appeared on his face. "Maybe we do." The interview went on for nearly an hour. But it didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation. Ethan asked about her past work, her ideas, even her opinions on trends in marketing. She spoke freely, forgetting for moments who he was. Sometimes he laughed softly at her honesty. Sometimes he just listened, tapping his pen lightly on the desk as if thinking through every word. When they finished, Ethan stood. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Carter. We'll be in touch soon." Emily stood too, still unsure if she'd just ruined or saved her career. "Thank you for your time. And again, I'm really sorry about earlier." He smiled again. "I told you, don't apologize. You made my morning more interesting than most." Her cheeks flushed. "Well, that's something, I guess." She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, he said quietly, "And, Emily, don't lose that honesty. It's rare." She looked back, unsure what to say. "Thank you." Then she stepped out, her heart pounding in her chest. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors finally opened to the lobby, she walked straight outside, gulping in the cool air. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or faint. She replayed everything in her head. The car ride, her rants, the way he'd listened, the way he'd looked at her. She couldn't believe she'd said those things to the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city. But there was something about the way he'd smiled at her. Not mockingly, not annoyed, just genuinely curious, maybe even impressed. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily went home, changed into her pajamas, and replayed every second in her head. Her roommate Lily walked in later that night holding takeout. "So, how did the big interview go?" Emily groaned and covered her face with a pillow. "Disaster. What happened?" "I accidentally told the CEO of the company that rich people don't understand real life. Because I thought he was my Uber driver." Lily dropped the food on the table. "You're joking." "I wish I was." Her roommate burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Emily, that's the most you thing ever." "It's not funny. He probably thinks I'm insane." Or, Lily said with a grin, he thinks you're honest. People like that aren't used to hearing the truth. Maybe you made an impression, Emily sighed. Yeah, a really bad one. She spent the next few days waiting for an email that didn't come. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was from Blake Innovations. Nothing. By Thursday, she had almost given up. She told herself it was fine, she'd messed up worse before. At least she got a funny story out of it. Then, on Friday morning, her phone buzzed. From HR Department, Blake Innovations. She stared at it for a full minute before opening it. It wasn't a rejection. It wasn't even a typical interview follow-up. It said, "Dear Ms. Carter, Mr. Blake has reviewed your interview and would like to invite you back for a second meeting to discuss a potential project opportunity. Please confirm your availability for Monday morning." Emily reread the message 3 times. A project opportunity? What did that even mean? She texted Lily immediately. He wants to see me again. Lily called her within seconds. Wait, what? The billionaire guy? The one you thought was your Uber? Yes, what does he want? I have no idea. Well, you better figure it out fast, Lily said. And wear something that doesn't scream, please hire me. Maybe something that says I belong here. Emily laughed nervously. Easier said than done. All weekend she tried to prepare. She looked up everything she could about the company's campaigns, studied their marketing style, even practiced answers to questions he might ask. But a small voice inside her wondered if this was really about a project, or if Ethan Blake just wanted to see how far her honesty could go. When Monday came, she was back in front of the same building, holding her bag and trying to calm her nerves. The receptionist smiled as if expecting her. Good morning, Miss Carter. Mr. Blake will see you in his office. No waiting this time. No assistant. Just her, walking straight to the same glass office where it had all started. Ethan was standing by the window again, phone in hand. He turned when she entered. Good morning, Emily, he said. She smiled nervously. Morning. Thanks for having me back. He motioned for her to sit. I wanted to talk to you about something a little different from the marketing position you applied for. Her curiosity grew. Different how? Ethan rested his hands on the desk. You said you'd like to make companies more human. I want to test that theory. I'm offering you a short-term project, a new initiative that focuses on community and employee engagement. It's something we've struggled with internally, and I think your perspective might help. Emily blinked, unsure what to say. You want me to lead that? I want you to help lead it, he said. You'd be reporting directly to me. Her heart skipped. She hadn't even gotten the regular job, and now he was offering her something even bigger. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Ethan said simply, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. Emily laughed softly, still in disbelief. Yes, absolutely, yes. As she stood to leave, Ethan said quietly, And Emily, next time maybe don't tip your CEO through the Uber app. She froze, then burst out laughing. No promises. He laughed too, and for the first time, she noticed how genuine it sounded. As she left the office, something inside her told her this was only the beginning, and whatever was coming next, it was going to change everything. The first few days of Emily's new project role felt like stepping into another world. Everything inside Blake Innovations moved fast. Meetings started on time. People walked with purpose, and every desk looked like it belonged in a magazine photo. She had her own small workspace on the same floor as the senior managers, which made her both proud and nervous. Her badge didn't just open doors, it opened possibilities she had only dreamed of a few weeks ago. But she knew that every eye in that office was watching. A few whispered questions followed her wherever she went. People wanted to know how she, a newcomer who wasn't even hired for a full-time role yet, had landed a project reporting directly to the CEO. She heard the comments, she must know someone, or she probably got lucky. Emily didn't blame them. She didn't really understand it herself, but she was determined to prove she deserved to be there. The first time she walked into a team meeting with Ethan, she could feel the shift in the room. He had that quiet kind of power that made people straighten up without him saying a word. When he spoke, everyone listened. All right, Ethan said, standing at the front of the glass conference room. This initiative is called People First. The goal is simple. Reconnect the company with its employees and the community. We've lost touch with the people behind the numbers. I want that to change. Emily sat with her notebook open, scribbling every word. Then Ethan turned toward her. Emily, why don't you share your thoughts on where we should start? Dozens of faces turned to her. She froze for a second, her throat dry. Then she took a small breath. Well, she began, I think people here need to feel seen. Maybe we start small. Create open feedback sessions. Highlight employees who do great work. Maybe even let teams suggest improvements anonymously so they feel safe being honest. One of the senior managers raised an eyebrow. We've tried that before. People don't usually participate, Emily nodded. Maybe because it felt like a formality. If leadership actually listens and acts on what's said, it might be different. People just want proof that someone's paying attention. Ethan smiled slightly, watching her speak. Good point, he said. Let's explore that. That small nod of approval gave her a burst of confidence. After the meeting, Ethan stopped by her desk. You handled yourself well in there, he said. Thanks, she replied. I thought I sounded nervous. You did, he said honestly, then added with a faint grin. But so does everyone their first week. You'll find your rhythm. Over the next few weeks, Emily did just that. She met with employees from different departments, listened to their stories, and noted their frustrations. Most were small things, long work hours, rigid schedules, lack of appreciation. But together they painted a bigger picture. Sometimes she stayed late, typing notes long after most people had gone home. Ethan would still be there too, usually in his office with the lights dimmed, staring at his laptop. One evening as she passed by his door, he looked up. Still here? Just finishing up the summary from the interviews, she said. I didn't want to forget anything. He leaned back in his chair. You don't have to impress anyone by working yourself to death. She smiled. Says the man who's still here at 9 o'clock. He laughed softly. Fair point. For a moment there was silence. The city lights shimmered through the window, casting reflections across the glass walls. Ethan closed his laptop and walked over to where she stood. You've done more in 2 weeks than some teams do in months, he said. Your ideas are sharp and people actually talk to you. That's rare. Maybe they just need someone who isn't their boss, she said. Or maybe they need someone who actually listens, he replied. She met his eyes. You listen too. You just hide it behind your calm CEO look. That made him laugh, genuinely this time. My calm CEO look? Yeah, she teased. That face you make when you're pretending not to judge people. I'll have to work on that, he said with a smirk. The lightness between them felt easy, natural. But Emily never forgot who he was. Every time she walked away from his office, she had to remind herself that he was her boss. A billionaire with 1,000 things on his plate. Not someone she could get too close to. Still, there was something about the way he treated her, respectful, curious, almost protective, that made her want to understand him more. A few days later, the company hosted a charity event for local schools. It was one of the biggest community programs of the year, and Ethan asked Emily to join the planning team. On the morning of the event, Emily arrived early to help set up. She wore a simple blue dress and sneakers, ready to carry boxes and hang banners. Ethan showed up later wearing jeans and a white shirt instead of his usual suit. For a moment, she didn't even recognize him. You clean up nice, he said jokingly when he saw her covered in tape and marker ink. You mean I look like I've survived a hurricane? She laughed, he smiled. A very productive hurricane. The event went better than anyone expected. Employees brought their families, volunteers from the community joined in, and local kids got brand new laptops from the donation drive. When Ethan got on stage to give his short speech, he thanked the staff and then looked directly at Emily. This initiative wouldn't have come together without one person's drive to make us reconnect with what matters, he said. Let's thank Emily Carter for reminding us that success means nothing without people. The crowd clapped and Emily felt her face flush. She hadn't expected to be mentioned, let alone in front of hundreds of employees. When their eyes met again, he gave her a small, quiet smile. After the event, she found him outside, standing near one of the food stalls with a coffee in hand. You didn't have to do that, she said. Do what? Call me out like that. I'm not used to attention. You deserved it, he said simply. You've done good work. She looked at him for a moment. Why did you pick me for this project? Really? He was quiet for a while. Then he said, because you said what everyone else was afraid to say, and because you reminded me of something I forgot. What's that? That success isn't just about ideas. It's about people who believe in them. The way he said it made her heart skip a little. Over the next few months, they worked closely together. Some nights they stayed in the office past midnight, brainstorming ideas, laughing over failed attempts, or sharing quiet moments between the chaos. Their conversations drifted from work to life, family, childhood, even fears. Ethan told her he grew up in a small town, working long hours before he ever made his first big break. "People think I was born rich," he said once. "Truth is, I was born broke and too stubborn to stay that way." Emily smiled. "That sounds like you. What does that mean?" "It means you don't quit. Even when you should probably rest," he grinned. Guilty. Sometimes she caught herself thinking about him when she wasn't supposed to, on the bus home, making coffee, lying awake at night. But she always pushed it away. He was her boss. He was kind, but distant in ways she couldn't cross. Still, their connection grew stronger with every project they finished. The company started to change. Employees smiled more, teams collaborated better, and Ethan himself seemed lighter. People whispered that the CEO was different now, more approachable. One evening, after a long presentation, Emily stood by the window of the empty conference room, watching the city lights flicker. Ethan walked in quietly behind her. "You did great today," he said. She turned. "Thanks, it was a team effort." "Maybe," he said, stepping closer. "But the team followed you." Her heart raced, but she forced herself to smile. "Careful, you're going to make people think I'm your favorite." "Maybe you are," he said softly. The words hung in the air. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The sound of the rain tapping the window filled the silence. Finally, he looked away. "You should get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow's another big day." Emily nodded, feeling her chest tighten. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Emily." When she walked out of the room, she knew something had changed. It wasn't just about work anymore. Something deeper had begun to grow between them, something that scared her as much as it thrilled her. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about his words. "Maybe you are." She tried to tell herself it meant nothing, that he was just being kind. But her heart wouldn't listen, and deep down, she knew the truth. The mistake she made that rainy morning had started something far bigger than a job. It had started a story neither of them saw coming. Weeks turned into months, and Emily's life looked nothing like it had before. Her mornings no longer started with stress and uncertainty. She walked into the tall glass building each day with confidence, greeted by people who now smiled when they saw her. Her project, People First, had grown far beyond what anyone expected. The office atmosphere had changed. Laughter echoed through hallways, ideas flowed freely in meetings, and even the company's image in the media had improved. Reporters called it a new era for Blake Innovations, and everyone credited one thing: Ethan Blake's leadership. But behind that new wave of energy was Emily, quietly driving it forward. She never bragged about her role, but people started noticing. When she walked into rooms, senior executives listened. Some even asked for her opinions before launching campaigns. It was both strange and thrilling, to be respected in a place she once thought was out of her league. But the one person who seemed to believe in her the most was Ethan. They still worked closely, meeting almost every day. Their teamwork had grown so natural that they often finished each other's thoughts during discussions. What started as formal check-ins turned into conversations that stretched long past office hours. Sometimes, after a late meeting, they'd share takeout in his office. He'd loosen his tie, she'd kick off her shoes, and they'd talk about life. It wasn't romantic, at least not openly, but there was something unspoken between them. One evening, while they ate noodles from paper boxes, Ethan looked at her and said, "Do you ever think about how all of this started?" Emily laughed softly. "You mean the day I called you my Uber driver?" He smiled. "That one. I still can't believe I did that," she said, shaking her head. "I thought my career was over before it even began." "Funny," Ethan said. "That was the best meeting I've had in years." She looked at him, curious. "Why's that?" "Because you didn't treat me like everyone else does," he said simply. "You talked to me like a person." His voice carried a quiet honesty that made her heart flutter. She didn't respond, just smiled and took another bite, pretending not to notice the warmth rising in her cheeks. The connection between them kept growing, but they never crossed the line. Still, small moments said everything words didn't. The way his eyes lingered when she spoke, The way her heartbeat sped up when he stood too close, or the way their laughter filled the room when it was just the two of them. Then one morning, things changed. Ethan's assistant came to her desk with a file. Mr. Blake asked if you could meet him in the conference room. It's about the presentation for the board. Emily grabbed her notes and walked over, unaware that the entire board of directors was already seated. As she entered, dozens of serious faces turned toward her. Ethan gestured for her to sit beside him. Emily will be leading part of this discussion, he announced. Her pulse jumped. Leading? No one had told her that, but when he gave her a reassuring nod, she stood, took a deep breath, and began. She spoke about the company's progress, the changes in employee morale, and how engagement had improved productivity. She explained it all with calm, clear confidence, something she didn't even know she had. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the older board members said, "That was impressive, Ms. Carter." Another added, "Your ideas have clearly made an impact. Well done." Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving her. "Told you she was good," he said to the group. After the meeting, when everyone had left, Emily turned to him. "You could have warned me I was leading the presentation." He chuckled. "If I had, you would have over-prepared. I wanted them to see your natural confidence." "Or see me faint," she teased. "Didn't happen," he said. "You were great." She shook her head with a smile. "You're impossible." That evening, as she left the building, she noticed her inbox flooded with messages, congratulations, thank yous, and one from an HR executive saying she was being considered for a promotion. She couldn't believe it, but while her career was rising fast, something else was quietly shifting too. Her feelings for Ethan were becoming harder to ignore. The late-night talks, the shared jokes, the way he sometimes looked at her as if the world outside didn't exist, it all lingered in her mind. One night, after a long charity gala, they ended up in the company car together, heading back from the event. The city lights blurred past the window. She was tired but happy. The night had gone perfectly. Ethan turned to her. "You did amazing tonight." Everyone was impressed. "Thank you," she said softly. "But it was your vision." "No," he said. "It was ours." The car fell quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "I never thought a mistake could change my life like this." He looked at her, his tone gentle. "Sometimes mistakes are just fate wearing a disguise." Her heart skipped. She didn't know what to say, so she looked away, pretending to admire the city outside. When the car stopped in front of her apartment, she hesitated before opening the door. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Emily," he said quietly. Their eyes met for a moment longer than they should have. Then she stepped out and closed the door, her heart racing. In the weeks that followed, rumors began to spread. People noticed how often they worked together, how easily they seemed to understand each other. Emily tried to ignore the whispers, but they made her uneasy. One afternoon, while reviewing a campaign proposal, she finally said, "People are starting to talk." Ethan didn't look up from his notes. "People always talk. It's their favorite hobby." "It could hurt your reputation," she said seriously. He finally looked up. "And yours?" "I'm not the one on magazine covers," she said with a small smile. He set the papers down and leaned forward slightly. "Emily, the only opinion that matters to me is yours. If you ever feel uncomfortable, tell me." His sincerity caught her off guard. "I don't feel uncomfortable," she said quietly. "Good," he said, smiling faintly. "Then let them talk." Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. A few days later, a journalist reached out to the company asking about the mystery woman working closely with the CEO. Emily's name wasn't mentioned, but she knew it wouldn't be long before someone connected the dots. When Ethan found out, he called her into his office. "The PR team will handle it," he said calmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know," she said softly. "But maybe it's better if we keep some distance. At least for now." He looked at her for a long moment, clearly unhappy with the idea, but finally nodded. "If that's what you want." "It's what makes sense," she said, even though her heart disagreed. The next few weeks felt strange. They still worked together, but things were more formal. No late-night talks, no shared meals, just business. It was what she thought she wanted, yet she missed him every single day. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from Ethan. "Conference room at 6. Need your thoughts on the final campaign pitch." She hesitated before replying, but curiosity won. When she entered the room, the lights were dim, and a single file sat on the table. Ethan was by the window looking out at the fading sunset. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. He turned, smiling slightly. "Yes, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For everything. The project's finished, the numbers are better than ever, and the board just approved a full-time executive position for you." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he said. "You earned it." She felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan, really." He stepped closer. "You did this, Emily. You changed this company." "You changed me." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said softly, "that before you walked into that car months ago, I thought I had everything. Turns out I didn't even know what I was missing." For a moment, they just stood there, the city lights glowing behind them, silence wrapping around the room. Then he said quietly, "You were right that day. Companies do forget the people who make them run." "I was one of them," she smiled faintly. "Maybe you just needed a reminder?" He nodded. "Maybe I did." She knew what he wanted to say next, and she felt it too. But before anything more could happen, someone knocked on the door. A staff member entered with a folder, and the moment broke. Ethan thanked the employee and turned back to Emily, his voice calm again. "Congratulations on the promotion. You deserve every bit of it." "Thank you," she said, holding back the emotions bubbling inside. As she left his office that evening, her heart felt full and heavy all at once. Their story wasn't finished, but it had reached a point where both of them understood that life was changing faster than they could control. Outside, the city lights shimmered just like they had on that rainy morning when it all began. She smiled to herself, whispering, "Sometimes the best stories start with the wrong ride." Months passed, and Emily's life had completely transformed. She was no longer the nervous assistant who once mixed up a billionaire for her driver. She had grown into a confident, respected woman who led projects, spoke in boardrooms, and made decisions that shaped the company's future. Her new office was on the top floor, not far from Ethan's. From her window, she could see the whole city spread beneath her, a view that used to feel unreachable. Yet even with all her success, she often caught herself thinking about that first ride, the awkward conversation, and the man who had believed in her from that very moment. Things between them had stayed professional after her promotion. They still worked together, still shared the same rhythm when brainstorming ideas, but there was a quiet distance now. It wasn't cold, but just careful. They both knew the feelings they hadn't spoken about, and neither wanted to risk what they had built. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. One morning, the company prepared for its biggest event of the year, the annual Innovation Summit. It was where the CEO addressed the employees, partners, and media, sharing the company's achievements. This year, Emily had been asked to co-present alongside Ethan. When she got the news, she almost didn't believe it. Presenting beside him in front of hundreds of people? It was both exciting and terrifying. The day of the event arrived faster than she expected. The venue was stunning, rows of glowing screens, soft music playing, and banners displaying the company's motto, "Building Tomorrow Together." Backstage, Emily adjusted her blazer nervously while checking her notes. Ethan walked in dressed sharply but with his usual calm presence. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," she said with a small smile. He looked at her for a moment, then said softly, "You're going to be amazing. You always are." Those words steadied her more than she expected. When they walked onto the stage, the lights were blinding at first. The audience clapped, cameras flashed, and the room buzzed with energy. Ethan opened the speech with his usual charm, talking about growth, challenges, and the journey of rebuilding the company culture. Then, halfway through, he turned toward Emily and said, "There's someone here who deserves special recognition today." She looked up in surprise as he continued, "When we talk about innovation, we often think of technology or strategy. But true innovation begins with people, with courage, honesty, and heart. A few months ago, someone joined this company and reminded all of us, including me, of what really matters." The audience went quiet. Emily's hands tightened around the folder she was holding. Ethan smiled slightly and said, "She didn't come from a powerful background or a fancy title. She came with ideas, honesty, and a willingness to speak her truth. And that truth helped us rebuild who we are today. Please join me in thanking Emily Carter." The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras turned to her. She could feel her cheeks burning, but she smiled, grateful and humbled. Ethan motioned for her to step forward. When the noise settled, she took the microphone and said, "I'm not sure what to say after that except, thank you. This company changed my life, and I hope I've been able to give something back in return." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes met Ethan's and he gave a reassuring nod. After the applause faded and the presentation ended, people surrounded her with congratulations and praise. She smiled through it all, but when she caught Ethan's eye across the room, he gave her that quiet, knowing look, the kind that said everything without words. Later that night, after the event, the office was nearly empty. Emily stayed behind to gather her things, still processing everything that had happened. She was standing by the window when she heard footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need one," he said. She laughed softly. "You still remember how I take it?" "Of course," he said, handing it to her. "Some things don't change." They stood side by side, watching the city lights below. For a while, neither spoke. The quiet between them was comfortable, almost peaceful. Finally, Emily said, "That speech. You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied. "You earned it." She smiled faintly. "Still, you made me sound like a superhero," he chuckled. "You kind of are. At least to this company." She took a sip of her coffee, then asked softly, "Do you ever think about how strange it all is? How one mistake can change everything?" "All the time," he said, his voice warm. "If you hadn't gotten into my car that day, none of this would have happened." She turned to him, meeting his eyes. "Do you ever wish it hadn't?" He shook his head slowly. "Not for a second." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 2 people who had walked through chaos, misunderstandings, success, and quiet longing. The distance they'd carefully maintained all those months seemed to disappear. Then Ethan spoke, his tone low but steady. "Emily, when I first met you, I saw someone who didn't know her own strength. Now you've become the kind of person this company and I rely on every day." Her heart beat faster. "You make it sound like I did all the work." "You did," he said softly. "But I'd be lying if I said you didn't change me too." She didn't know how to answer that. So she smiled instead, her eyes glistening. "You know, I think that might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." He smiled back. "It's just the truth." They both laughed quietly, the moment tender and light. But beneath it was something deeper, a shared understanding that their connection wasn't just about work. It was about 2 people who had helped each other become better versions of themselves. After that night, things slowly began to settle. The rumors around the office faded as people focused on the company's growth. Emily stepped fully into her new leadership role, mentoring younger employees and helping create the same kind of opportunity she'd once been given. Ethan continued to lead the company, but everyone noticed a change in him. He was more approachable, more grounded, and more human. The intimidating billionaire image had softened, replaced by a man who listened, laughed, and gave others credit. And although neither of them ever labeled their relationship, everyone could see the quiet respect and affection between them. They didn't need to say it. It was there in every look, every small gesture, every shared smile. One afternoon, nearly a year after the day they first met, the company held another event, this time celebrating record-breaking success. As the applause filled the room, Ethan turned to the crowd and said, "This achievement belongs to all of you. But it also reminds me that sometimes the best journeys begin in the most unexpected ways." He glanced toward Emily, who was standing near the front, smiling. A mistake, a coincidence, or maybe a bit of fate, whatever you call it. It brought the right people together at the right time. The crowd clapped again, but Emily could barely hear it. Her heart swelled with gratitude. After the event ended, she walked up to him and said, "You really like talking about fate, don't you?" He smiled. "Only when it proves me right," she laughed. "And what's it proving now?" "That sometimes," he said, "the wrong turn takes you exactly where you're meant to be." Her laughter softened into a smile. "I think you might be right about that." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the buzz of people congratulating one another, cameras flashing and music playing. Yet to them, the world felt quiet. In that moment, Emily realized something simple and powerful. She had finally found her place. Not just in her career, but in her life. She had gone from struggling to survive in a small apartment to standing beside someone who saw her for who she truly was. Not a mistake. Not an assistant, but an equal. And while she didn't know exactly what the future held for her and Ethan, she knew one thing for sure. She would never forget how one small misunderstanding had led to the greatest chapter of her life. As the evening sun filtered through the tall glass windows, Emily took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered to herself, "All because I got into the wrong car." The world outside kept moving, but for her that moment was enough. A reminder that sometimes, life's best surprises begin with a little confusion and a lot of courage.